Mate, my knee's bunged up today.
What's been happening with it?
I do my squatting and deadlifting and like my lower body kind of strength work usually on a Monday night. And this week I've been restricting the depth of my squats intentionally since I had my surgery because I had to let the meniscus repair, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I got the clearance to now squat to full depth. And I can't because it's still swollen and sore. So I kind of haven't been able to go much deeper than I have been. However, on Monday night, I pushed it just that little bit. I was like grinding for that extra little kind of couple of centimeters. And I tell you what, and it was good. It was a good session. I posted about it on Instagram and Facebook. And please make sure you like it. And fuck, man, my knee has been really angry ever since.
Wow.
Super swollen, really stiff. I'm hobbling again. I spoke to the physio, said, yeah, it's fine.
That's part of the process, huh?
Yeah. But I was like, oh, shit, did I do something? But I don't think I've done something. It's just inflamed.
It's a fine line, eh? But at some point you have to stress it.
Yeah.
It's you really have to be onto it.
Yeah.
You were box squatting a long time ago, like sit to chair. Is there a way of doing that?
Well, I just had that.
Having that measuring point consistent.
Yeah, that's all it was, just to limit my depth. And then sort of, more recently I've just been going kind of to the point of where I can feel it tightens up and then I stop. So I guess on Monday I just pushed into that tight point a little bit and leant into that right knee a bit more because from the videos I made I could see I was shifting away from it ever so slightly.
Yes.
So
Yep.
yeah, little changes, aggravation. Guys, welcome to episode 59, Jungle Brothers Podcast. It's Paul and I today. T's not here. It's his son Tainui's birthday.
Woohoo.
Happy birthday, Tainui. It's also Az's daughter Ruby's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ruby.
They got the same birthday? They do, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, how about
Unless T got it wrong.
that? It's highly likely. But if you follow me on my Instagram, I put out a post about 20 minutes ago and I was like, guys, Paul and I are about to podcast today and we don't have a topic. And sometimes this happens because we're essentially here coming up with stuff to talk about and to create content. And for the most part, that's very easy and it comes to us quite easily and there's a lot of things to talk about. However, for some reason today there wasn't. And we're like, fuck, what are we going to talk about today? And it's also, we don't have T here. And normally if he's here, then the three of us can kind of brainstorm something on the fly. So in any case, I put it out to the people and I had a couple of responses, all really good ones. But one of them from a good friend of mine, Mel, from Athlete X over in WA. Shout out, Mel. He asked us to talk about the difference between deliberate practice versus exercise. Now, if you're not familiar with what that actually means, we're going to go into it. And we're going to kind of explore that idea a little bit, which is actually quite timely because what we've recognized of late, and this is, Paulie, I think you've been doing the same, we've been training more in parks because obviously we can't train in the gym. And there's a lot of people training in parks and we're seeing a lot of people out there exercising. You've been witnessing this?
I have, yep.
What are your kind of initial observations when you're seeing people out there doing their thing?
Oh, yeah, you just think, oh, geez, they could be doing that easier, or they could be doing that better, or what is that? I wonder what that's
Who
what
invented
that's for.
that movement?
Yeah. I mean, it's so good that people are out and about and they're moving and they're trying to figure it out on their phone or whatever. But you just think they could be doing it better if someone set them on the right track. And
what do you mean by better? You're saying they're doing a shit job of it?
In some cases, yeah, if you're looking at the specific movement. But I guess something with a bit more purpose, maybe tied to something that looks like, they're developing something greater out of the movement rather than just trying to get a heaving sweat on and a pump on. And, they want to look good, probably. They want to lose some weight and that's all admirable and necessary to live a healthy life. But I just think there could be more to it,
Yep. Yeah, I totally second that. And I guess it's important at this point to tell folks who are listening that we're going to sound like wankers. We're going to sound like movement wankers in this episode and strength elitists. And that is sort of just comes with the territory because like we acknowledge that exercise is good for people and that doing something is for the most part better than doing nothing. I'll explain why I don't believe that wholeheartedly later. But for us, we sit at a place within the fitness industry where we see a lot of low quality stuff that we don't stand for, and we have high standards, and we uphold those standards in our gym, and we have great aspirations for the people that come in here, and we believe that the people that train with us also understand that, and they buy into that, and that is essentially the process they're on, or the journey they're on with us, where we're helping guide them through this thing that makes them a better human. Now, not all gyms and not all coaches and not all exercise enthusiasts operate in that manner. And so we're going to pick that apart a little bit. And so I just wanted to make that point that, if you're kind of listening to this and maybe you're the kind of person that's just started getting out to the park and bashing out some workouts, maybe you saw some shit on Instagram, maybe you watched a YouTube thing, or maybe you're just copying someone else or whatever, that you have the right intention, your heart is in the right place, and it is not our intention to stop you from doing that. However, let us shed some light and give some alternative perspectives on why we think that often this approach is misguided, shall we?
Yes, sounds good. I was just thinking how I came about to be here and think like this myself, and I was never like someone who did exercise at one point, in a very formal way for a long time before I was enlightened by another way of thinking. I've always come from the perspective I was always like a game player, and then the formal, more kind of scientifically considered way of training assisted me with reaching those things. So I've always had like a more of a skilled type. Move towards developing a skill rather than, just doing the exercise. It was just like a little thought for how I came about to being here. So I've always been that way inclined to be like, how can me doing lunges and squats assist, say, the fighting or the playing of the sport type thing?
What was it? Take us back to where that sort of transition was. So you didn't have that perspective initially. How did you come to have it?
Truthfully, it was hanging out with UNT, and, initially, like I said, it supported the playing of the rugby or the starting of jiu-jitsu back then, and it supported me in, perform better, be stronger, gas out, later type thing. And then as I learned more about how it worked, and I got more deeper involved with the Jungle Brothers and the development of everything here, I started to appreciate more the process, and that the process in the conditioning and the strength can actually be a bit arty as well, if I can put that kind of word on it. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be boring, even the development of the strength and stuff. So yeah, I guess my interest just kind of peaked over time.
Yeah.
I like I said before, I historically didn't come from many years of just being in the gym, doing it one way, doing barbell, doing bodybuilding with friends and stuff like that. I definitely came from a sports background, and it kind of just creeped in on me over the years, training with yourself, Ting, and being with JBs, going to a bunch of workshops, you guys pushing me to go to workshops and stuff like that. Slowly opened up, to the way I see things now.
And what do you think? Talk a bit more about what that sort of way of seeing it, like back when you were playing rugby. I remember you were playing with your bro, and you guys would go and do some squats. You guys would go and lift weights before you played rugby. You'd go and squat the morning of a game, right?
That was Mo's idea.
Yeah, he was so wedded to that idea. He was like convinced it made him more athletic on the field, right?
Yes, yeah. I don't. It was a long time ago, so I was probably like. Yeah, I remember I was playing Colts and I was 19 and stuff like that. I'd like to know what the loads were at that time, because I just remember it being heavy and it feeling pretty fucking hard, and I can't remember whether it affected my performance or not. But he was adamant that it helped him before a game.
And he didn't really lift regularly. He lifted before games. It wasn't like he was in the gym during the week doing the thing, right?
No. He might have gone, probably sporadically. I can't quite remember, but he was probably a lot like myself, where it would be here and there. He'd be playing basketball. I mean, he was playing freaking tennis twice a week with your cuzzy.
Yep.
They were flatmates, doing everything.
Were they playing at Birchgrove just there? At
Yeah,
the ones
yeah,
near
yeah.
their old
Louise
place?
Ave. Yeah, they
Yep.
play there. They play squash. I mean, all those guys. They were really active. They came from a very active generation, actually.
Yep.
What was your original question?
Well, my original question was what was your kind of perspective back then? Like, what did you view exercise as? Because you obviously placed some value on it because it was like, you'll go do the weights with Moses or whatever. But was it just a pursuit of fun, going and kicking a ball around, or was there,
Oh, it's probably hard to believe, or it might be hard to believe, but I had no thoughts on it. Honestly, I had no thoughts on it. To me, it was let's go play basketball, let's go skateboarding. Like I didn't even put, the idea of exercise or conditioning for something. Like that wasn't. I used to see that as training. I used to do rugby training twice a week or soccer training twice a week, and that was, you do a few stretches, and it's probably now that I think back at it, that's how a lot of people think about that in all the ball sports and all the tiers. There's probably 1 million people playing ball sports in Australia without getting paid. I think a lot of people just don't have much of a perspective on it. Maybe now because there's so much information out there, and maybe that's changing. But I didn't have much of a perspective on it at all. I was playing when we were at school. We were smoking cigarettes and stuff like that, and I was like, I won't smoke during the season, but I'll smoke in the off season.
Yeah.
I'd
Periodized smoking.
Periodized smoking. And I'd go jogging. I'd do runs, but I didn't have anything formal or any coaches or anyone to guide me through that. Whereas I think some people grow up in a family where they have whatever. Dad played rugby, and he's training his kids or at least giving them some advice along the way.
Yeah.
So you're not much at that time.
Okay.
How about you?
Yeah, well.
And because you were the guy who was doing exercise.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
I remember coming to the gym with you when we were quite young and meeting Big Head, and you were eating a chicken a day,
Johnny Bighead, yep, chicken a day.
and we were going
Washing
there.
it down with a
I'll
Pro
never,
shake.
I never remember forget like when we were doing those
See, how's that?
incline bench. See, mate, we were doing incline bench press and stuff like that at Gladesville at that gym, and I was like staring at this bar on my chest, trying to get it off my chest, and I was like, it wouldn't move, And I was watching you like push it off, and I was like, "How is that happening? I'm bigger than this guy."
And he's white.
I didn't say it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's, it went through stages, right? So I guess to paint a picture for folks, I was exactly the same as you. I never gave any thought to, training or whatever besides like martial arts.
Yeah, martial arts.
Yeah, and that was just the pursuit of martial arts. It was
Correct.
it was nothing beyond wanting to know how to fuck people up and like do kung fu and stuff. Swing nunchucks and whatever. And then, and then we played soccer obviously, and we skateboarded. So, we were inherently physical. But my gym experience started with a friend of mine called Tino, a guy called Tino Ho, who was the biggest Chinese guy I've ever seen. He was when I worked at a fish shop, Gladesville Shopping Centre, and Tino's dad owned the $2 shop downstairs, and Tino would work there on Saturdays, and he'd always come up there travel later like to get his breakfast and whatever, and walk past our shop, and he was a tall guy, and he was big and jacked, and I was like, "Fuck, that guy's big," And he was a really good looking, really nice dude. Like you kind of couldn't miss him. But he would cruise past, and he would like wave, and we'd say, "Oh, hey man, good morning." And we got chatting one day, and I can't remember what, but he was like, "Oh, bro, like, do you work out or whatever?" And I was like, "Oh, no." And he said, And I'm just trying to think, man, where does this fit on the timeline? Was this before Johnny Bighead and those guys?
How did I not know about Tino? Or maybe I've just forgotten.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe this could have been your period of. We had a bit of a lull there. We weren't hanging out as much, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Maybe.
I was out west for a few years.
Yeah, but he was like, look, man, do you go to the gym? I was like, no, not really. And he's like, man, you should come with me one time. I was like, I'd love to. Because I was like, this guy's cool and he's jacked and that looks like I wouldn't mind looking like that.
Yeah.
And so he trained at Macquarie Uni at the gym there. It's like a student gym. And so I started going with him on Monday nights. And all I remember from that was that we just did heaps of exercises and they were really fucking hard. And I struggled with all of it. I remember like every time we would do pull-ups. We would do pull-ups first. Or no, we'd do pull-ups last. And I couldn't do pull-ups. He'd be like, oh, we're going to do like 4 sets of like 10 of these. And I could do like 1 or 2 and they sucked. And I remember feeling quite inadequate about that and just being like, oh, this is really hard. And that gym was full of a lot of like university age, kind of jockish sort of dudes who were pretty jacked. I remember there was a couple of guys there that were stacked. Looking back, I'm like, man, there was a couple of guys there that were juicing and they were like, you know, big cats. So when you're in a place like that, you're instantly comparing yourself and you realize what you don't have in that world.
Yeah.
Anyways, I had that. I also had the other experience of the boys from Gladesville, Johnny Bighead and the like. And we used to go to the gym in Gladesville. And I don't remember which one of those came first, but we used to go to the gym in Gladesville and push weights. And it was all that. It was like, I remember I bought like weightlifting gloves because like resistance training gloves because I thought that was the thing. And I bought all the different protein powders and I used to eat tins of tuna and, you know, every 3 hours had to eat. And I got no fucking gains. Like, I mean, I got minimal gains, right? I got something out of it. Maybe I could incline bench, you know, 2 kilos more than you, but I really didn't. I wasn't like my body shape was changing and I was turning into this rippling mass that you see before you now.
Early 20s?
Early 20s. Yeah, late teens, early 20s. So, you know, that was my entry into the exercise thing. And essentially it was bodybuilding. And I ran with it for a long time and it was pretty unfruitful. And I think that a lot of people can identify with that, like a lot of guys for sure. Just like, why am I doing this? Is it even working? You know? And, you know, if I look back at those times, it was very simplified. It was like lift weights, do it till failure, eat heaps of chicken and tuna, and you're going to get big. And you know, and you listen to the guy at the gym who tells you, mate, you gotta do benchies 3 times a week. If you want to get a big chest, benchies 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, benchies. So I was like, fuck, go do benchies, you know. And I could bench press like I was bench pressing a toothpick, you know. Like, anyways. If I kind of think from there, I had sort of 2 other distinct, maybe 2 or 3 other distinct avenues of my development within this realm, which was. One was I started hanging out when I moved to Bondi. I started hanging out with the calisthenics guys.
Yes.
Down at the bars.
Yep.
And that was the first time I started to see results. And we were just doing, and again, it was a very simplified pursuit of training. It was like, you know, who's turning up today? Like we just sort of rock up in the afternoon. Oh, hey, it's me and 3 other guys. All right, cool. We got like 4 of us. Here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to go like 30 minutes. You're going to do as many pull-ups as you can, and we just go one after the other, and we keep going. And you would do that, and then you would do the same for push-ups. And then you would do it again the next day. And then someone would go, oh, why don't we do like 2 reps, 6, you know, 8, 10, 12. Like, why, you know, everyone's just coming up with creative ways to do more of the same shit. And, you know, and there was not really any thought of why are we doing this or what's the best technique for a pull-up or like discussing the intricacies of the movements. It's just doing shitloads of reps. You know, it coincided. I started to get some results. I started to grow a bit. I think it was also because I was just getting older. I was really a kid when I was trying to push weights, like back in my late teens, early 20s. So in any case, and then I, you know, did you ever come train at the outdoor gym? Did you ever
a couple of times, yeah.
Did that, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember those guys like Lionel and Damien and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, Lionel, yeah.
Jacked Frenchman.
Yeah, tiny waist,
just
wedge,
pencil legs.
Yeah,
but this rippling upper body.
yeah. That was like most of them.
Yeah, that was the look.
Yeah.
I mean, for those guys, right? Luckily, I always had legs.
So when you talk about this historically, those phases, and you've probably got a few more to talk about, I do look back at that as like I look back at that and I'm envious of those years that you did. Like, and I kind of find myself sitting here wishing I had those experiences. Like, you know, I'm a baby compared to, you know, those experiences. Like I said, you asked me, like, how did it all happen for me? And this has all happened in the last 6 years for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, you had those and I kind of live off the back of those and I think, shit, I wish I went through that phase and got really jacked at that time. But, you know, just different paths, eh?
That's right. Yeah, and I know what you mean. I mean, if I'm honest, I remember when you and Moses would talk about going to squat before rugby, and I'd think, oh, I wish I could go do that. You know what I like?
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
like I was like, oh, like what's it like? What's the gym like? It sounds like they're all adults. So, you know, like because you used to go, you were playing up with his guys, weren't you? Sometimes
I was playing Colts.
You didn't.
Yeah. I played 5th grade, 4th grade, and stuff like that. Sometimes. After.
Yeah, right. So you were like knocking around with fucking men on the football field.
Oh.
But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But you know, look, it's, you know, if it's not sort of plain to see for anyone listening, there was a lot of wasted time as well in a lot of that training. But it did give me something. It's brought me to where I am.
Definitely.
But you know that the calisthenics thing coincided with me taking up jiu-jitsu, and then jiu-jitsu sort of launched me into a deeper interest of physical conditioning, and that was where I got, my brother and sister bought me 2 adjustable kettlebells for Christmas one year, and that was when I started swinging kettlebells. And
same ones we got downstairs.
Same ones we got here in the gym. If you train here, the yellow and green ones that most people don't touch because you can never really sure what weight they are. They're those ones. And that, you know, and then I bought Pavel's book, Enter the Kettlebell, and you know, so I started to take an interest in it, and I was running that blog for a little while, Adventures in Training.
Oh,
you remember that?
Yeah,
that
was cool.
Some funny videos on it. I think they're still on my YouTube channel. And that also brought me to CrossFit. It was where I sort of discovered CrossFit in that same time because I had friends in Bondi who had gotten onto this fucking underground thing called CrossFit, this like secret website where they post these fucking hectic workouts, and you know, and so I started meddling with that, and it was essentially it was all really good. Jiu-jitsu was what I was most interested in, but I definitely liked the aesthetic that I was starting to develop. I liked becoming muscular and filling out my frame, and you know, I think I'd always wanted to be a bit thicker and a bit more muscular. I aspired to that. I mean, fuck, I had my walls were plastered with Van Damme and like Dolph Lundgren pictures as a child. So, like, undoubtedly,
such a great bedroom. It was all Bruce Lee. It was Van Damme. It was
movie posters,
nunchucks, and other weaponry.
Yep, knives and sai and
whatever the fork is that.
That's the sai.
That's the sai, yeah.
Fuck yeah, all that stuff.
You had like that little wooden thing with it was the short. It was like a baton, but a short one.
Yeah,
that you could do shit with.
Yep, that baton's lethal. I think I still got that somewhere. My uncle made that for me. Responsible guy.
But yeah,
that was like that. I was just doing the training, right, and I was liking what was happening. But still, at this point, there was no real consideration as to how the body works or what it needs or what these different elements of training are. It was just doing a bunch of stuff. And I remember when I went to my first CrossFit class, which was at it was like CrossFit Bondi had hired this little garage down in Paddington, what was it called? White City, I think. It was like a little sports area. And they, you know, I did a couple of CrossFit workouts, and they were doing some skill training, and it was like some Olympic lifting one day we did and some muscle ups on the rings. And I was like blown away. I'm like, muscle ups, like what are these? And I'm like, oh yeah, we used to do them at calisthenics, but now we're doing it on gymnastic rings, and they had these progressions and they were using the bands, and that was the first time I'd ever been exposed to a somewhat detailed level of skill training where it's like, hey, these are the progressive steps to get towards this thing that's pretty hard. And I don't think anyone there, the coach or any of the people in the class, could do a muscle up at the time. So it was all very abstract. But I was like, oh, this is different because we're talking about some high level shit now.
Yeah.
That was my first insight into, that side of things.
So you weren't a coach at this time? No.
Nah.
Yeah, I guess that's probably where that's the beginnings of thinking like a coach, I suppose.
Yeah.
You're like, shit, how do I get to point B?
Yeah.
It's like, what's the best way to get there? You
Exactly.
know? And what do I need to know and do in what order type thing? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what are we talking about? Like if we use your example of that little history line, what are the differences like from doing simple stuff where you're very much developing your strength and you're building muscle compared to moving on to something that started to become more skill-based? Well, you were doing you went to calisthenics. It was a similar thing, but, applied differently with bodyweight training.
Yeah, but there was no progressions.
There was no progressions?
It's just like do
I see.
shitloads of this.
Yep.
Oh, hey, try this thing I created. Let's do this exercise.
I see. And then you're starting to go to jiu-jitsu and you're doing the skill thing, and you were doing a lot of kettlebell and energy system development specific to that sort of jiu-jitsu training, or it complemented it.
Yeah.
And then you found this thing which was, in a way, something that in order to progress in it, say it was the Olympic lifting, you had to think a lot more you had to approach it differently, smarter.
Yeah.
It was more complex in order to progress.
Yeah, it had to be
the skill.
And I think what that is when you boil it down is that one approach requires awareness and the other doesn't. And if I look back at that time, throwing kettlebells around the garage or doing calisthenics or trying to get big down at Gladesville Gym, there was no awareness in any of that time. There was no understanding of like setting my shoulder before I benched press, or what are my abs doing, or what position do my feet have on the floor? Where are my knees? Are they bent? Are they not? Are my glutes activated? Like just all of those little things that we now take for granted, where you set up and you do a movement or an exercise, you execute it deliberately. None of that existed. So I was completely unaware. So it's just like lie on the bench, grab the weights and just press until you can't press anymore, and then get me another 3 reps kind of thing. And that's really what I think we're talking about, is having awareness versus not having awareness. Because that's what I see when I see people in the park bashing out some fucking Kayla Itsines little fitness routine, is a complete lack of awareness of what they're doing. And it's not, and in the same way that I just described my little journey, it's not their fault. They just don't know, and they haven't been exposed to, no one's shown them the way.
Yeah, no, it's a really good way of putting it. And that's, so I guess to me, it seems like there's different levels of awareness as well. Like how does how does this movement fit into a bigger framework, as well as being more aware of the movement you're doing in the session that you're doing as well? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, okay, so the way I kind of see it is what I was doing over that time was just exercising, right? I'm just doing stuff. I'm doing things. It's hard. I'm getting a pump on. It's building some muscle. I'm breaking a sweat, whatever. If I kept doing, like, I got away with it because I'm in my teens, I'm in my 20s. And then, coming into my 30s, I started to get a lot larger perspective about this whole thing. What I see for a lot of people who never grow out or never develop out of that 20-year-old kind of approach to exercise is that they end up injuring themselves, right? I mean, we all get injured, right? Case in point, my knee's fucked, but came about for a different reason. But for people who never adopt this awareness and never take what we could say a deliberate approach to their training, they end up running into a wall at some point. Now, the question is, why do they run into a wall? And here's the thing. This is how I see it. If we all we approach exercise and whatnot in the way that we have a perfectly functioning vessel, so that our body is a high quality machine and it can just do whatever. And so I go do push-ups, it makes me stronger. I go do running, it makes me more athletic, whatever. But that perspective doesn't pay any attention to the individual needs of my vessel. So it doesn't pay attention to the fact that I flare my elbows when I do a push-up, and so I'm creating sort of a dysfunction in the shoulder joint. It doesn't pay attention to my hip flexors being tight and my ITB being tight, which means my knees track funny when I run, so I have a funny running gait. And that's because I sit down a lot and work at a computer through the day or whatever. So as you get older, the need to identify these things becomes more and more important. And I guess what I see is that a lot of people just don't recognize that. So their training never takes the path of, what do I actually need? Like, where is my body right now? Where is my head? What's important for me and how do I get to where I want to go? It's just, I'm going to go and do exercise because my body thrives on exercise. And that's really where this issue comes about. That's where this exercise thing is. It views the body as a machine. So it's like, go and exercise for 30 minutes and you'll burn enough calories to not get fat today. Maybe that works in the short term, but it's not going to work in the long term because your hips are fucked and your shoulders are wrecked, and you need to do some work on those things. So the other side of it, where we're from and what we're talking about, is it's a lot deeper and more complicated, and it requires help usually from someone who can keep an eye on you, but it requires awareness. Whether it's someone else that can say, dude, your shoulder's not working well there, your position here sucks, we need to fix your hips. No, I don't want you to put any weight on the bar yet. Let's just get the mechanics right. Like all those little things, that's what the awareness brings, as I see it.
Yeah, you make a very good point with the age thing. And when I think about the people that I've observed in the park, like if there's young people running around in the park like Labradors, just doing whatever, that's not what makes me wince, but it's usually the people who, they seem to be late 20s to 30s and above that I can see. And we don't exist in a bubble. And as time goes on, we're not roaming the earth day by day, kind of foraging for food and moving around in, a natural type of form all the time. We're sitting at desks or we're carrying injuries and we're time poor. And so we pick up these things along the way. And then we don't, the awareness, I guess.
These things being... mobility deficiencies, restrictions.
Sorry, yeah, that's right. And then, you get busier as you get older, so then the awareness starts to dissipate. Or, you don't hear things as loud, say your knee, you just ignore that, type thing, or it's kind of normal to get those niggles. And then you get this scenario now where people are wanting to get to the park and they're just running around doing whatever without that awareness that you speak of. It's a very good point.
Yeah, it kind of ties in, I think, with. I feel this about running, right? There's certain physical activities that, in my opinion, the majority of people think they know how to do just because they're alive.
Human.
Yeah, they're human. They're like, oh, I know how to run, so I can go run. Or I know how to do a push-up, so I can do push-ups. And I would confidently say the vast majority of people do not know how to do such activities. And the reason is, like, someone knows how to put one foot in front of the other.
They know how to get from point A to B quickly if they had to.
That's right. And they know that it's going to be hard work and it's going to break a sweat. So therefore, the simple equation is, well, that equals exercise, and exercise makes me healthy. However, they also don't realize that they've not, like you said, we've not lived this natural lifestyle where we're roaming the land and we're having to rely on our physicality on a daily basis, and we're sitting on the floor and we're not sleeping on soft mattresses, we're sleeping on a harder ground, and we're doing more kind of natural activities. We've so far separated from that process now. Like the way we live is so alien to the way our body was, the environment that our body was designed to live in. So we have to acknowledge that we are all operating at at a substandard level or a suboptimal level in that regard. Like, there's no way. There's even for me, someone who is quite aware and you could say I'm quite conscientious with my training and approach to all these things. I still sit at a computer for large periods of time during the day. I sit down a lot. That tightens my hip flexors. It pulls my head forward. So I have to work on those things if I want to be able to do, whatever, Olympic weightlifting or the cool shit that I like to do, right?
Mm.
So I think a lot of people really just don't see that. And again, I don't blame them for it. They just haven't been told. Hopefully they're listening right now.
Hey.
But so they think like, oh, I can just go out to the park and bash it out. And it's kind of that same idea. And I know T likes to use this analogy a lot, but it's the idea of a car. And it's like people want to take their car out and thrash it because they think that that's going to be what's going to like make the car like better and stronger and run better. But it's like you can't, if you keep taking your piece of shit car out and thrashing it, it's just going to fall to pieces on you. So what you're better off doing is like upgrading it piece by piece and like driving it a little bit and progressively driving it harder as you upgrade the tires and the fucking, all the accessories and whatever. And then eventually you got like this pretty sick car that you can drive pretty hard, but it's been this incremental process to get towards the way it's now performing. So it's like you have to earn that. And that, one thing on this realm that always sort of grinds my gears, and it's because I hear it from my parents' generation a lot, is and the fucking Radio National or wherever it is they listen to.
Hey, Radio National's good.
I like Radio National, but tell me if you get this one. Apparently I only need to do apparently 4 minutes of or 2 minutes of very high intensity exercise is all I need to be healthy.
You know what? What's his name? Dr.
Michael
Swan?
Mosley. Oh,
well,
Dr.
Dr. Swan had like one of his Corona casts had some exercise shit on it, and he was like, he recommended, and it came to the end, and he was like, this is his big recommendation. He was just like, you just need I think it was like 12 minutes of HIIT training every few days. HIIT training's the one. I was like, oh, I really liked you up until just now.
Stay in your lane, Swan. But it's that idea of, and this is because a lot of this information comes from scientific studies, and they're looking at an isolated part of our physiology. So maybe they're looking at cardiovascular health, and they're like, well, what's the minimum amount of exercise required to improve these fucking 1,000 people's in our test markers of cardiovascular health from this point to somewhere that's considered marginally acceptable? And it's like, well, these group that did 2 minutes a day, they achieved that mark. And it's like, that's all you need.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, cardiovascular health, sure, but you still can't fucking move. Your knees still don't work. You're still weak as shit. Your hips don't work. Like, it's not just as simple as heart health. Yes. And, we could say that from a medical perspective in the West, we were very heart-centric and very cardiovascular-centric with our health recommendations, like the Heart Foundation, the tick of approval, the low-fat eating, that all tied into cardiovascular health. No one ever spoke about, what about joint mobility? What about actually being strong enough to pick things up and, carry shopping and fucking kids and whatever? And what about what about being, having like a base level of coordination so that you trip over less and you're less inclined to snap your wrist or break your hip?
Well, that's the problem with the West age, just seeing things in separate parts too much.
Yeah.
Compartmentalizing things.
It's 100% black and white in its view. And so for people who are already not particularly interested in this shit, they're like, 2 minutes is all I need. I'm just going to buy an exercise bike, rip out 2 minutes, and I'm good. And it's like, oh man, you don't want to be the guy that's like, no, it's not good enough. Here's what you don't want to fucking crush their party, but sometimes you just got to crush their party.
Yeah, I'll be sending this podcast to a few people after this. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about so we talked a little bit about the deliberate, knowing some deliberate movements and working on specific skills and investing time into developing, some specifics. What about when we talk about deliberate practice, say trying to develop a skill or say martial arts or jiu-jitsu or something like that. How do you see that fitting into the whole picture? And I can't help but think about the movement, and movement, and the way that they kind of look at deliberate practice. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's kind of seen as something greater to strive towards, the understanding of your body and developing it to become more useful and more adaptable to every situation.
Yeah, maybe. I think the movement is really just about finding niche attributes of physical expression and exploring them. And it doesn't. I don't think it. And it doesn't do it because it thinks those things are important. It does them because we can do them. So, like punching a tennis ball against the wall. Like, really, there's not really any great need for anyone to do that. If you're a boxer, maybe. But it's more just, you can do this. And if you do this for fucking hours a day for a year, some cool shit's going to happen. I don't know what, but it's going to be, but it's going to be cool. So let's do it. Like, I really, that after having spent time in the movement community and that kind of thing, a lot of it comes down to that. And, it's very much a thing for enthusiasts of that realm.
They're very big on deliberate practice, no?
Well, yeah. I mean, what are we talking about when we say deliberate practice?
Yeah. Okay. I guess it's a definition to kind of work out now.
Yeah. So I guess we're saying that deliberate practice is when you're going into your practice. So think of a practice like you're going to the gym to train for an hour, and instead of just doing repetitions in a mindless fashion, which is what you could say I was doing that for a long time, benchies and whatnot, just doing repetitions. Oh, what exercise we're doing? These 3, yeah, let's go. Deliberate practice is training in a way, and I was just reading about this before on James Clear's blog because I wanted to just make sure I sort of had this definition down. But deliberate practice is the idea of training with the specific intent to increase your performance or improve your performance in a particular thing. So for an athlete, for someone whose job it is to kick a ball in the back of the net, it is going into your training session. Okay, today I am working on fucking approaching that ball as it's moving and nailing it in the net and specifically that thing. And I'm going to do that really well. And I'm going to bring that awareness to every repetition. And I'm going to be completely focused on that as I do it.
Yeah. So I guess you could say you couldn't say it's black and white as it's this particular training session is deliberate and this one isn't. Like, I guess there's layers because everything's deliberate. Like, even if it's I'm trying to freaking whatever lose weight or get jacked, you're still trying to get a big chest when you're doing benchies. It's deliberate. I guess it's just different levels of awareness.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So then I guess where am I trying to get at? Like, the reasons why people do things. Like, is there like a higher level of awareness?
When?
So say, I guess I'm trying to find out where that fine line of like this type of training is better than this type of training, and this is why.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we have to allow. Well, like you said, there's varying degrees.
Because the highest level of bodybuilder who knows his shit scientifically in and out, he's aware in every single rep, is he not?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, take your own training as an example. Tell me when you're doing, when you are doing a Fight Factory class and you guys are working on technique and you're working on let's say a 5-step combination.
Yeah.
Now I'm imagining, because I don't do that stuff because I'm a fucking jiu-jitsu guy, all right?
No.
Got that?
It's not true.
But when you do that stuff, you're very focused and you're thinking a lot and you're working really hard on the small details to refine every movement and every step of it so that you can execute it as well as possible.
Yeah,
Agree?
See where you're going. Yeah, yep.
So that in my opinion would be highly deliberate, right? when you get into sparring, you probably have rounds with certain people where you take a similar approach. You're very self-aware, and it's like, I'm just working on specific technical elements. But tell me, sometimes when you're sparring, you don't just go into a fight and you're like, oh, it's fucking stepped up a notch now, and I'm not
swinging,
and I'm just going for it. And you're doing it in a structured, it's still deliberate, you could say, but it's definitely gone away from this highly refined, highly technical and thing where I'm now just relying on what I know and I'm fucking going for it, and I want to wreck this dude in a responsible way.
And hoping the training kicks in.
Well, yeah, because I do that in jiu-jitsu all the time. We do that in jiu-jitsu together. You have this spectrum of like very aware, very technical, very deliberate, and then it's like it's a fucking scrap. And I'm calling upon all of my pre-built skills, but I'm scrapping right now.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's the same in strength and movement in many ways. We make people do some kind of skill and strength training that is slow and deliberate, and we're giving them a lot of cues, and we're ripping apart their technique, and we're making them think about things. We're slowing them down. We're making them rest. And then we get into a Metcon, and we have parameters, we have standards, but we let the reins off a little bit, and we're like, fucking go for it now. Run the block, do the burpees, swing the fucking kettlebell, let's go. And we have we have standards in terms of, if you're doing something that looks dangerous, we're going to stop you and we're going to fix it. But if you're doing okay, like if it's like 90% correct, that's good enough for us. So I see that there's a time and a place for both. Because sometimes just exercise or repetition is important. However, if that's all you have, I think that is a grave mistake.
Yeah, so there's being deliberate and being aware on a few different levels, whether it's in a particular repetition, whether it's in a program, or whether it's in like the greater journey that you're moving towards, if you have one at all. So, you may not have one, or like I said, it's all deliberate. You're going to have one, and that is whatever, 6-pack. At the very least, you don't want to be fat or something like that.
Yeah, that's still it's still an intention, isn't it?
Yeah. But then there's definitely levels, and there's, I guess, of comparing to say that of the simplest form of like a goal that you want to achieve, and then there is, I would say, there is better goals. There is better things to strive towards, especially because it's not sustainable when it's so simple as well. Would you say?
Maybe. I think it comes down to the individual.
True.
But and I mean, there's no. In theory, I have no problem with people bashing it out and doing, say you look at your standard kind of boot camp approach where it's just like, all right, here's another collection of exercises that are pretty challenging, that are kind of like the ones we do every other week, and I got this cool rep format. We're going to use a deck of cards, and you guys are going to fucking do shitloads of these burpees and whatever, and let's get it. Time's on, and everyone goes for it, and most people have fun, right? It's like, oh, that was a tough workout. See you guys tomorrow. That, in theory, I got no issue with that, because you're training, you're doing it, whatever. But the thing is that you've made the assumption there that most people can operate within that a level of intensity, and that it's going to be safe for them in the long term for them to keep doing that. And I think that only applies to a very small percentage of people. So then, and this is why in practicality, like in our gym, we know that doesn't work. That's why we have classes like body weight. It's why we have classes like stretch. That's why we have a movement screen and a foundation program that people have to go through before they can start, because we need to find the deficiencies first and work on that. I don't mind if someone's like, I just want to get a 6-pack here. I just want to lose weight and look good naked. It's like, that's fine, as long as you do what we tell you in relation to all those other elements. So as long as you follow the process and you respect you respect your body as much as we respect it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Because we've, in a sense, here we've created our own little niche where we're into handstands and we're into fighting and stuff. And we've got people here that don't care to learn a handstand, And I'm totally okay with that. It's like, fair enough. That's, there is no, I can't sell the handstand as a functional exercise that you need to have in your life. It's just cool. And, we're all here training, so why not get some skills out of it? The skill development is very much something we're interested in, because I guess if we acknowledge that the training piece needs to become an ongoing thing that has to become part of your life, that's how you're going to actually get the best results from it if you incorporate it into your day-to-day and you do it forever, then layering the skill thing on top of that gives you something to attach to and something to buy into emotionally, rather than just flogging yourself in the gym each week. It's like, I'm going into work on my Olympic lifting, or I've been working on my deadlift and I'm really keen.
Or don't want to fall behind on my fighting because I don't want to get bashed.
Exactly. Like that is an incentive.
Yeah.
And I do think that in time, the person who says they just wanted a six-pack would start to have bigger goals than that.
Yes, yeah.
I
just had a thought there, and I wanted to ask you about another aspect of the skilled part. It's probably a bit that I think I enjoyed as well, becoming a coach. It was when I first started thinking about being a coach and being exposed to certain people and material. And that's just the idea of when you work on something that requires a high level of awareness and consistency and all those things, when those goals are higher and more difficult to overcome, the other shit happens too in terms of personal development. So you're attracted to, you've set this goal and it's higher than just doing mindless reps, and it requires more mental energy and drawing on other aspects of yourself to overcome them or to keep doing them and achieve them. Then I guess I just wanted you to speak on that aspect of it, which I found to be much harder to keep grinding away at something over a longer period of time, not seeing as many results, say. And I know, and I always use jiu-jitsu as the example of it for me, because it was when I'd been playing ball sports a lot. Then I hadn't been doing martial arts for many years, and I came to martial arts, and it was like got bashed up on the mats by smaller guys, and just sitting there going, what the hell just happened? And then starting, as a white belt, and just seeing how difficult that was, and the fact that if I wanted to overcome it, I had to do X and Y, whereas it was really obvious how much I had to lift my game to be able to progress, given that I had played ball sports all my life, and you could, well hide in the team in win or loss. It was just a very individual thing that I had to overcome. Can you comment on that aspect of deliberate training on that level?
How do tell me in your case, what sort of things did you have to address there?
First of all, just going back all the time and finding
going back to the gym.
Going back to the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to the gym. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was it wasn't like really bringing me down in a horrible mood, but yeah, it's kind of harder to go into that as an individual rather than meeting up with 30 guys on a Thursday night. You know what I mean? And then going and having schnitzels or something afterwards. It's like you just need to turn up. You're the bottom of the heap and no one's really trying to help you.
Yep.
And you're going in there and just getting your face grinded off for months and months at a time.
Yeah.
So you're that mental aspect of shit, I like this thing, but it's not treating me very kindly, but I want to break through.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then, also realizing that, my strength wasn't there, so I needed to get stronger in certain aspects, certain movements. My flexibility was not there. So having to scratch my head and go, how the hell did I do this? And this was before I came into Jungle Brothers with you guys over here in Botany. So it was like, shit, how do I do that? So then I find myself trying to figure that out and trying to work that out and coming to you guys, then putting together a program or something for myself, just as in stretch every day, stretch before class, stretch after class, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so I guess you're getting at the other kind of lifestyle sort of habits that have to fall into line to allow that to occur?
Yeah. I guess it's just if you're trying to work at something that's, well, having something that's suitably challenging, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For your level, whoever, like everyone's on a different level, and maybe doing benchies every day is really hard for someone to have to do. But I could not do that I couldn't do that. I was playing soccer. I could do soccer. I was playing soccer 3 times a week all the time. That's fine for me, but I think I was on autopilot for a long time and I wasn't challenging myself.
Yes.
So meeting a challenge, something that required me to step up. You know, if you want to develop, you've really got to face something that's worth, you know, your body and your mind having to develop for. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I see what you're getting at there, and I think for a lot of people a lot of people just don't wish to undergo that process. So I'm just going to keep playing soccer, or I'm just going to keep playing jiu-jitsu. And then usually like something happens that makes you feel otherwise. And the thing that usually happens is your health suffers, right? So like
that's usually what it is. When that becomes an issue, then they address it.
You go to a doctor and they're like, mate, your back is fucked. Like, I'm going to have to send you for a scan, but you go scan physio, and the physio's like, mate, your back is a wreck. I need you to start doing some strength training. And then you're like hyper motivated to call your local gym and get a personal trainer, right? So, and I deal with jiu-jitsu people all the time who are like, oh, I'm just not that into strength conditioning, you know, I just want to do jiu-jitsu. It's like, yeah, that's fine, but you know, statistically, you're not going to survive if you have that mentality. And I can't convince you to change your attitude right now, but probably when you're like late 30s and you get forced onto the sidelines because your repeated meniscus damage in your knee means you can't train jiu-jitsu anymore, you're probably then going to come around to it. And you know, and that's totally fine. Like people come around to making a change when the time is right for them. And largely for us, we're quite fortunate in that we run a gym where we sell this kind of thing. So we have a responsibility to uphold ourselves to a standard. You know, so it makes it kind of, for me, that's a big motivator in my training. I'm like, no, I've got to progress with this stuff and I've got to maintain these things and I've got to develop it, whatever. But what I do think is, it's very empowering for people who have the discipline and the commitment to look outside of what it is that they strictly enjoy, to find other things that will allow them to continue to enjoy that thing. So like, all right, I really like playing tennis. That's what I'm interested in, but my shoulder's fucked and my knee's not been feeling good for years. So I'm going to go get that personal trainer. I'm going to see them twice a week, or I'm going to go to that stretch class and that lift class. I'm going to do that every week. And I'm gonna do that, and that's gonna help me be able to play tennis better and not have to live in pain. And then, you know, when you do that, then you got to manage your schedule better, so time management becomes a thing. And then, you know, your trainer starts to tell you, do you sleep much, or what's your recovery like? Are you eating well? And then before you know it, you're working on your nutrition and you're working on your getting to bed on time and all those things. And I think that process of development and growth is very empowering for people. Because before you know it, you're like, oh, wow, like I went for this one specific thing and now I've got this really cool kind of holistic.
That's kind of like the story of, that's kind of what I was getting at, I guess. That was kind of what happened to me when I started coming out of that fog and I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I was like, shit, whatever, I've got to sleep, I've got to eat better, I've got to get stronger for that thing. And it was a bit of a spring, if you might put it that way. Yeah,
so then in that way, so the training.
So
my
awareness was building.
Yes.
In health and all the other aspects surrounding it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
And I mean, like, you know, that's I don't know. What did that feel like? Was it tiresome? Was it like, oh fuck, now that my awareness is, I'm going to sleep more, or was it like, oh sick, like this whole new part of my vision has opened up to something that I couldn't see before?
Absolutely. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like you asked me, what did I think of exercise? And I didn't really have a clear perspective, or, you know, it was obviously I knew that it existed, but, you know, contrary to a lot of common belief, like people just don't think about exercise. I love skateboarding. I skated every day of my life. It was a long time. Surfing, I just didn't think about exercise. You know what I mean? And then it became this thing, and I was like, shit. And you know, the perspective now is like, wow, like how can you not think about these aspects because they're so important? And you ask how it felt. It felt great because as I started sorting out these bits and pieces and becoming more aware of you know how my physicality really, and that's eating, sleeping, how I spent my time, where I spent it, what I was wearing to support those things. Like, yeah, I just started feeling better and better. I was having this conversation with Tash on the side about Japan this week. We're talking about like this trip we went to when we went to Japan pre-kids, might have been 9 years ago or something like that. And we were reliving it a little. And I remember being like an asshole on that trip. I was a bit of an asshole, and I remember being tired, and it being, and this is why I mentioned it, Tash. Like, I remember being tired, and it was like, it was great. It was a great trip actually, but I remember it being hard to figure out what to do and where to go, and everything was just a little bit hard work. Do you know what I mean? Like getting up, oh, we got to go there. We got to
hassled.
Bit of a hassle, like get up early, like carriage, whatever, get changed and go do this thing. And
it wasn't like our trip to Japan where we'd get woken up by the fucking owners of whichever place we're staying at telling us checkout time was 2 hours ago and we were still drunk.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember every fucking place we stayed at, we get woken up, they're like, oh, you meant to check out 2 hours ago.
Politely.
And we're like, oh, shit, we got to get our stuff.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah. Anyway, it was like, yeah, it was just a...
Why?
I wasn't as aware of my physicality then, if I can put it that way. And, you know, I drank a lot more then for sure. I was a good drinker, right?
You could put it away.
I could put it away. And, I mean, I never did before or after pictures, and I never really do that sort of thing. But if you put a before and after picture on me now, it'd be completely different.
Yeah, you're carrying thickness around the trunk.
I just carried alcohol around on me. It was just like, I was like puffy. It was just puffy, yeah?
Yeah.
And I never had an issue with it or anything like that. And I never had a drinking problem, but it was just I didn't do any kind of deliberate exercise, or I never thought that, hey, I should sleep more, and just wasn't aware that if I did small things, it actually would render results like positive things, because it wasn't tangible for me. I just wasn't brought up that way. You know what I mean? So, it was just a point I'd make, because I know that now I have way more energy, and that's a really shitty thing that you can't hold or measure. I got way more energy than I ever did before. And I got 3 kids now, and I still have more energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Getting up on the weekends was just always sluggish and stuff like that. But yeah, so you're going back to like the spring and the figuring all those things out. Bro, it felt great. I was like, this is mad. Sun feels good on my face.
That's interesting, isn't it? And like, I'm guessing now you would have that feeling like where you haven't done some training in a day, and you might be at home and you're like, feel yourself a bit pent up, and it can be expressed through how you're responding to, to Tash or to the kids. And some days there's nothing you can do about that. It's all right, I can't do any training today. But some days you're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to go outside and do something for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. I'm going to jump in and do that class. And it changes your whole state.
Totally does.
And you only had that thought because you have that awareness of yourself, and you're like, okay, that's something that my body actually needs each day.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it now. And yeah, I guess now my sensitivity is a lot higher,
Yeah.
I can feel it. I'm like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. But yeah, it's a funny thing. That was, if you remember, that was a time when I also cut my hair. It was like a full spring. I started training. I was working on films, and T came back from the UK, and we were training on this movie, like at Fox in a container,
I remember
and out
you
in the
guys
park.
doing that.
Yeah, and then shortly around that time, I remember cutting my dreads off.
Oh, New Year's Eve at my place.
Yeah, exactly.
On the half pipe.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then it was just like that whole time for me.
Yep.
Was just really cool.
Yeah, right. So that was like a little bit like a rebirth
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool. I was thinking like going back to people like grinding it out in the park and doing, made up exercises and terrible squats and all that kind of thing. For me to cast judgment for us to cast judgment on them is a bit unfair because who knows? Maybe they've been staying at home every other day stretching and like working on coordination drills and agility and stuff, and then they just came out to do a conditioning workout, and then I'm judging them. But I think not. Like I think likely that they're not doing that. And I guess if there's a strong sort of takeaway message for people is that like our bodies are in some ways they're very complicated machines or organisms, probably better way to put it. And they in a way they require a lot of different things, but it can also be quite simple in what they require. And I guess the way we try and look at it here is that you need to identify what it is that it needs. So what are your major mobility restrictions, and what simple movement patterns can you not execute correctly? Like, can you squat? Can you lunge? Can you lift your arms up above your head without, arching your back? Can you bend forward and touch your toes? All those kinds of things that are pretty basic. But if you can't do them, then, okay, so what do we need to do to get you to be able to do that? And how's your coordination? Like, can you put those movements together pretty well? Okay, if you can't, a lack of coordination is a thing. Like, that's something we want to work on. If you've got coordination, if you've got the mobility, all right, cool. Then we can start to turn up the intensity and do some hard training and whatever. But without that foundation of the mobility and the coordination and the general body awareness, we don't want to go down that path of intensity, because that's where you're likely going to hurt yourself. And then you're going to be tarnished by the exercise experience, and you're probably going to have the opinion that it was the exercise that fucked you up, when in fact the exercise was perfectly fine. It just wasn't the right exercise for you at that time.
Yeah, 100%.
I really feel quite strongly about that. And so when I see people who are, there's a blatant disregard for what their body needs, I'm like, they just haven't had somebody tell them. And they don't want me to walk up to them in the middle of a workout and say, hey bro, can I give you some feedback on what you're doing right now? Like, that's not the time and place generally, right?
You have to wait till they cool down.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell them.
Dude, something that actually, this is a funny story. This always strikes me. I was training the other day at Botany down at the park where we go, Sir Joseph Banks, and I had my rings up, and I was doing some stuff on the rings. And there was a family kind of cruising around the park, two kids. One kid was on a little razor scooter, and the other kid was on a unicycle. And it was like when do you see a kid on a unicycle, right? And it was like a little kid, like
in Botany all the time.
Yeah, the kid was probably like 6 or something like that, like quite young. And then there was a mum and a dad and whatever, and the kids, they were playing in a spot just kind of nearby me. They could see we could see each other, and I was doing some stuff on the rings that they obviously thought was kind of cool. So they were watching me do some muscle ups and stuff. And then when I was resting, I'd look over at them, and then they'd do some shit. So the kid on the unicycle was like bouncing down the stairs and then cycling around, and he was hopping up on this little ledge and riding on the ledge.
It's a battle.
Yeah, it was like a little movement battle, right? And this sort of went for a few sets. And anyone who's trained on the rings in the park I'm sure can identify with how you form instant connections with kids who are also playing. Because there's something about them that they're drawn to. They're like, that's cool, you're playing, I'm playing too. In some way you're counterparts.
So
at that
true.
Moment. And they were doing their thing, and then at a point their dad's like, all right, let's go. And then the two kids turned to me and they waved. And I put my hand up and like gave them a thumbs up, and then they like gave me a big thumbs up, and then they're like, yeah, like they were pumped, right? And there was this mutual acknowledgement. It was like, you guys are doing cool stuff, I'm doing cool stuff. And I thought like that attitude of like just wanting to connect and probably seeing like, oh, there's something fun that's happening that I could learn from. Because I'm guessing they probably would have liked to have come over and me show them a couple of things on the rings, and they would have jumped up and learned a trick or whatever. Whereas for their dad, like he definitely wasn't in a headspace to like look at what I was doing and then talk to me. And he's worrying about his kids and he's probably fucking stressing about work and he's probably got, you know, like there's a million things on his plate. But I was like, fuck that kind of simple connection that can come between folks, like that you can have with a kid when you're training in the park or with anyone. And you do sometimes have it with an adult where you'll start talking. They might ask you, oh man, how do you do your pull-ups or whatever? Like that looks real nice. Can you give me some tips? That's so valuable, those little exchanges. They're the exchanges that I wish I had with high value people back when I pushed weights in the gym, rather than with old Corey who was telling me I had to do benchies 3 times a week. Would have been kind of cool to have someone go, you know what, man? Like you don't actually have to do all this shit. You just need to do a few things really well. And here's what you need. I think those exchanges are like super valuable.
Probably got something to do with why you enjoy coaching or got into coaching.
Probably does, huh? Yeah. I love that when we got people here who want to learn and they're like, tell me what I should do.
Yeah.
And it's like, great, let me show you how you can be better. And then when you get the people that don't want that, you can't help but feel irritated by it.
Yeah. We don't get that much here anymore.
No, they don't walk through these doors very often. They might in the beginning, and then they come around to, all right, I gotta take some advice here.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We're mindful that there's other blocks that need to be, for some people, that need to be brought down before we can have those sorts of conversations.
Yeah, we're lucky with the people that we work with here.
Yeah, well, we've chosen them. They are the chosen ones.
You are.
My bro, we've done a good stint there. I say we wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Training and exercise. Guys, thanks for listening. If you found something about that interesting or you want to challenge us on some of it, let us know. Flick a comment up. Send us an email at Jungle Brothers Movement on Instagram or junglebrothers.com on the website. If you know someone that would benefit from listening to that, please feel free to share the episode with them. It helps us grow the podcast and it helps other people learn the good word. No real events come up with, but we are talking about details for the Jungle Brothers Christmas party because we want people to get excited and have something to look forward to. So keep an eye out. There'll be more coming out on that soon. If you want help with your training, you know where to reach us. Thanks, Paulie.
Peace.